And finally, we now come to perhaps one of the biggest examples of Chris's delusions, something that has ever since corroded his very small, very tiny mind, and something that I'm pretty sure a lot of you are sort of becoming to terms with the fact that, well, nobody plays into this anymore, and I don't even think Chris even plays into this anymore. And just to give a little bit of a quick update before we begin about my hand, it's fine, it's just bruised quite bad, so yeah, don't worry, nothing's broken or anything like that. So let's begin. The dimensional merge. Now, the first thing we gotta stop and ask ourselves is, what exactly is Chris talking about? What exactly is a dimensional merge? Well, to put it in layman's terms, it's Chris's belief that there's a fantasy world filled with cartoon characters that actually exists in some form of reality, and it's only it's a form of Chris's maladaptive coping mechanisms. It's to justify the fact that Chris doesn't actually have to do anything, and that he's perfect completely the way he is, and everyone else has to treat him just the same. That's basically it in a nutshell, but because there's a little bit more to it, we're going to find out. So, from the video where Chris talks about the dimensional merge, see the announcement, and damn Dimension 1218's reality limits and shit. Chris, after New Year's 2019, disappointed when our reality did not merge with Sonichu's. Also Chris, the dimensional merge is completed. All that remains of Universe 1218 is the failing Earth period. Chris coping with being sent to jail for an extended period of time. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else can I say? That's apparently, it was all in the script. Meanwhile, there's, you see, what Chris decided to do here is that he wrote on Virginia's freedom of speech wall, Dimensions C197 and 1218 are merging, beware of your surroundings, keep calm. Yeah, and thankfully, nobody decided to pay attention to it. Thank God for that. Also, I know Chris is quite tall, but how did he manage to get it all the way across this top part of the wall? Questions. and bigger question is whether or not Lewis really is Clark. If Lewis is going out with Clark Kent. The dimensional merge, or the dimensional merger, if you're an even bigger idiot, is a supposed apocalyptic event in which Chris believes that Dimension 1218 and Dimension C197, read the universe of real life and the parallel universe where Sonichu and other fictional characters live, will combine, bringing fictional characters into reality, and in which Chris, being the designated Leonze of the event, will ascend unto godhood. Of course, the merge is just an escapist fantasy and coping mechanism for Chris. Originally part of the lore the old idea guys had brainwashed into Chris, the dimensional merge is Chris's latest means of avoiding reality, believing that it will rescue him from his self-inflicted, real-life problems and enable him to continue living like a child. First announced in October 2018, the merge was expected to take place by the end of the year. That deadline and several others passed without incident, but Chris has remained persistent / delusional. In the years since, indulging this belief has become the default latching on point for would-be trolls. In the beginning, whoa, I nearly just flipped my mouse over. Chris has, for a very long time, believed in the existence of one or more alternative universes, where every fictional character lives. He first alluded to this belief during a January 2010 phone call with Alec Benson Leary, in which he told Leary that Aspachu would surely have negative feelings about his own name, and repeatedly call Leary naive for explaining that Aspachu is not a living sentient creature who lives in another universe and can independently generate his own thoughts. This is most likely one of the things Chris has learned from copious amounts of television. More specifically, he offered the 1988 animated comedy film Who Framed Roger Rabbit to Leary as evidence for a toon world, inhabited by every published or unpublished cartoon character. Now, as I know you find well you're saying is that in the same phone call, Leary questioned Chris the fact that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was still just a movie and none of that exists in reality. And when Chris really did want to ask Leary if he didn't believe that that couldn't exist in reality, and of course Alex said yes, Chris called him naive immediately. So Chris has had, I mean, I know Chris has had his issues long before 2010, but this is sort of the thing where you're beginning to like take a step back and think to yourself, wait a minute, what? He can't really be serious, can he? From then up to the Dimensional Merge saga, Chris has increasingly believed that the fictitious city of Quickville and its characters were real, embracing their alleged existence as a way to escape from anything he does not like. Chris has been spotted conversing, interacting, and even dancing with his imaginary friends on many such occasions. Throughout 2017, Chris appeared convinced by the idea guys that the Sonichu and Hyperdimension Neptunia universes actually existed, but in a separate dimension. In July 2018, Chris tweeted at Marvel writer Sean Maguire, asking him to confirm the dimension number of this Earth. Maguire responded with Earth 1218, and later clarified that this was the Marvel's universe designation for the real universe. Chris took it as gospel, and subsequently uses 1218 to refer to the actual existing universe. Weeks later, Maguire reiterated once again that everything was imaginary, but Chris's response to Maguire and various trolls indicates that he still believes that people such as Maguire can communicate with other dimensions. By the way, in case you do want to see some of Maguire's work, I would recommend it. At least, you know, you can't really blame Maguire. He was a complete innocent in all this. Over the summer and fall of 2018, Chris met with the TT Squad, people who gave him weed, pretended to be possessed by Sonichu characters, and that the universes would merge. Relations to the financial crisis. Chris believes that he is wealthy in Quickville, and that when the dimensions merge, he will have access to his money, and there he will be able to pay off his current real-world debilitating and crippling debts. He has to borrow money from people, claiming he will pay back 10 times the amount once the merge concludes, not realizing he sounds like a more autistic version of the Nigerian prince scam. On the 8th of October, Chris tweeted, "Sometimes I just want to give up, but my loves won't let me. If people could help us here in this world monetarily, we would be okay. I promise all of you that when that day comes, I will reimburse you, personally in the nation of Quickville." You know, it begs the question about if Chris just wanted to do that, why didn't Chris just... It's simple. Here's what you do. Chris, you start a new YouTube channel. You find a niche you know relates to Sonichu. You make videos about it. You don't respond to trolls. You just make videos as you did before. You become monetized by Google. You make money from Google doing this. I mean, somebody with Chris's reputation, you would have imagined it would have taken Chris maybe a few days to have at least 5 videos out, to have roughly 4,000 watch hours in literally a couple of days, and if Chris could have saw the impact, it could have changed his ways so that he could have actually have made more money just through YouTube than he would. But again, trying to actually communicate smart ideas to Chris is literally like talking to a brick wall. I wish it wasn't the case, but, well, what can I say? He followed up on the 23rd of October with, "When the worlds merge, I will have access to tons of savings in Quickville. It is a lot of money, indeed. 10 to 1 is my repayment rate." On the 24th of September, Chris was sued by Second Round Sub for unpaid debt, and on the 23rd of October 2018, so less than a month later, Midland Funding followed suit. The case for the former was postponed to January, but the verdict of the Midland case was read on the 19th of December 2018, requiring Chris to pay $2,777.90 at 6% interest and $55 in court costs. Remarkably, he has done little begging in the wake of the lawsuits. This has surprised many, considering the immense amount of times he has grovelled online for money in the years 2016 to 2018. He has instead chosen to stick his head in the sand and pretend that the merge will solve all his problems for him. Beliefs on the merge. When I had to go to hospital and stay in hospital with heart complications, Chris sent me a message from his Magi-chan Sonichu account claiming that my symptoms were associated with effects from the dimensional merge. No, it's because, Chris, you are very, very unhealthy, and this is, time catching up with you, according to Ali Hirschberg. Chris announced the event on the 14th of October 2018. On the 26th of October 2018, Chris posted a video entitled Dimensional Merge Announcements, where he outlined the process of 1218 merging with its sister dimension C197, where every fictional character known to exist resides. He believes that once the merge occurs, Earth will be shared by humans and various characters. On the 14th of November, Chris made a tweet explaining the survival rates for the inhabitants of the sister dimensions during said merge. Chris explains the population math as follows, and we have covered a lot of this before when it comes to Chris and science as well as his relation to math, so I won't bore you too much of here, but basically Chris is under the illusion that 51% of 1218 is going to survive, 41% of this Earth is going to die, and there's something of an 8% margin of error, so it could be as little as 47% of Earth surviving, and more than half the population dies, which doesn't exactly sound like a good idea. And I don't know where Chris even comes up with the idea for this, but what do you expect for someone who writes all of this down on a McDonald's napkin? That's not a basis for, any scientific breakthrough, but that's Chris. Chris explains the math as follows. 61.25% of the population of dimension C197 is identical to that of Earth in dimension 1218. The remaining 38.75% of the population of C197, ROCs, are unique to C197. All of the OCs of C197 are guaranteed to survive the merge. At least 51% of the human population of the Earths in both sister dimensions will survive the merge, and at least 41% will not, with an uncertainty of 8%. The best outcome of the merge would have 59% of the population of 1218 alive, and all of the 38.75% of the OCs of C197, plus 11.25% of the human population of C197 in the dimension 1218 C197, the dimension 1C-211987 would be left with 109% of 1218's current population, leaving approximately 8.365 billion humans and OCs in the new universe. Need to take a moment to pause, ladies and gentlemen, because did any of that make any sense? No, it didn't. And here is the proof. Chris Thanosing the two dimensions with the Infinity Gauntlet. Yeah, not that I imagine the Mad Titan had to do any thinking either, but there you are. Naturally, he believes that he will be guaranteed survival because he absorbed the Spiral Seal from his Sega Dreamcast and is therefore the middleman between the two dimensions. He believes that himself and Megan are basically deities. This was the point where Megan Schroeder, and yes, that is who the Megan Chris is referring to, Megan Schroeder made it entirely known to Chris that she possessed guns and didn't want to have anything to do with this. And Chris backed off almost instantly. And that he will gain superpowers following the merge because of his belief that he is half Sonichu. He sent dozens of follow-up tweets, further detailing the process, explaining that Quickville would replace Northern Virginia, Gotham City will replace a portion of New Jersey, and a question, well, again, Chris never explicitly states what part of New Jersey. Is it going to be White House Station? Is it going to be Karlstadt? Is it going to be Harrison? Is it going to be Montclair? You know what I'm saying? Chris... whatever. And Equestria will take over the entirety of Maryland. He explained that this will resemble a natural disaster scenario and that mass evacuations may occur during the merge. On the 18th of November 2018, Chris announced that the merge had begun. This date coincides with the anniversary of the Jonestown mass S-word, implying that the idea guys had originated the merge concept, as their calling card was inserting infamous historical dates into Quickville lore. And Chris ate that up like you wouldn't believe. In early December 2018, Chris reported feeling psychic headaches and associated the merge with the California wildfires and Remain Letters recall. As the merge drew closer, he claimed to have lightning powers, and that the millions of volts of electricity in his head is evidence that he is half Sonichu. Without giving a time estimate for the merge, he tried to dispel doubts by claiming that he can touch and feel Magi-chan and Grizel Rosechew. He estimated that the merge would conclude by the year's end. This is despite the fact that, as you might imagine, nobody believed it, but Chris somehow chose to continue with this. Why, I don't know, because I think at this point Chris is, as they say in the trade, he is all in with this. Magi-chan doxing incident. On Christmas Day 2018, someone claiming to be Magi-chan logged into Chris's Twitter, posting a paste bin dump containing the docs of one of the TT Squad's members. They also stated that the merge would actually take place in 20 years due to time dilation, and that Sonichu residents of C197 would need to hibernate until then. Chris ultimately disregarded the news. Until he absolutely had to. The merge in 2019 and beyond. Naturally, New Year's Eve of 2019 was an eagerly awaited moment as the final chance for the cataclysm to occur. In the early morning of the hours of the 1st of January 2019, Chris spoke out on Twitter in a New Year's address explaining that the merge had not happened on time due to red tape, betraying some internal bureaucracy in the process of becoming the goddess of 80s computers. He remained insistent that the event would still occur, adding in reassurances that the Sonichu verse was still awake to remind everyone of the Magi-chan doxing's non-canon status. Good New Year, everyone. I shall make my statement for now, and I want no backtalk or hateful commentary. The dimensional merge of C197 and our 1218 is still in progress. There is more damn red tape to work through, but our goal is still set. It is only delayed. Everyone of C197 is still very much awake. We have secured our thwart in our magic-proof cell a few days ago. Not even that witch's courier on Facebook can say otherwise, because I know better. And her words shall never get to or sway me away or any other way. I still remain the CPU blue heart of the Commodore consoles, Quickville and Comma, and everyone is safe and well. But for now, I shall delay online talk of the Dimensional Merge through my social media accounts until further notice. And I still remain very much married to Magi-chan, Sonichu, Grizel Rosechew, Sylvana Rosechew, and Mewtwo. There is room for at least one from this dimension, but there is no rush. For now, happy New Year, everybody. Dismiss. Lightning, heart, lightning. The context behind Chris's aside about Arthur was revealed in screen caps Lucas leaked on /cow/dot. In them, a person purporting to be an Arthur-possessed Jessica Quinn PMs Chris's over Facebook saying she had tried to trick Chris into believing in the merge. However, the attached post from Lucas suggests that Lucas had been posing as Quinn in an attempt to pass the blame onto her. I'm not even the one who started the merge thing. I just tricked my mom's sugar daddy into buying Chris's porn shit. Here's screenshots Chris sent to me of texts from Jessica Quinn, pretty sure she's the one. Despite Chris stating that he would abstain from talking about the merge until further notice, he went on to mention in the following day, while writing about superpowers that he got from it. On the 4th of January 2019, Chris said that he was awaiting further information on the merge, more indication that the entire merge event had been scripted and fed to him by trolls who were no longer in the picture. Because of some deity level red tape, it's delayed, but it will happen soon enough. But don't make a big deal about it until I have more further information about it. Chris during the Jackson Dalton interview. Particularly troubling about Chris's comment is that he wants more information in order to verify that his delusional thoughts are real. By admitting this, He highlighted a path for new trolls to get into his head, showing he failed to learn from the Idea Guy saga. Several eager weens rushed in to fill the gaps in Chris's knowledge. Though by mid-June 2019, Chris had apparently become overwhelmed with these and has since turned to other, more credible sources. Continued hope in the merge. After the first deadline for the merge had passed, Chris remained optimistic that the merge would still happen at some point. While he was initially quiet about it, I wonder why, he began ramping up the rants about the merge again around spring. On the 31st of March, he tweeted, "The dimensional merge is still happening and going on. C197 plus 1218 equals 1C-211987. OCs are really becoming more obvious here. There are even some sightings of a Dio blonde vampire in Egypt. Descendants beware, Dio is coming after you all." Several merge-related tweets followed in April, in which he claimed that people in Japan were seeing OCs, and blaming the Notre Dame church fire on a Pokémon. The events around this time given clear context for Chris's renewed interest in the merge. Early in March 2019, after Chris was gifted a Nintendo Switch, he developed an obsession with playing the augmented reality game Pokémon Go. The game's premise revolves around using smartphones to see Pokémon characters in real-world settings, which coincides with Chris's beliefs about the merge. On the 2nd of April 2019, Chris was sued for debt for the 4th time, further confirming the link between the merge and his financial problems. On the 3rd of April, so the very next day, a new troll entered the stage with a future message for Crystal Western Chandler, who presented himself to Chris as a messenger of the merge. Beginning in summer 2019, Chris would emphasize more often that the merge is already nearly done and would soon be completely finished. Like an obscure sect leader struggling to explain to his followers after the fact that why the second coming had not come when he calculated it should, on the 13th of June 2019, Chris claimed that he had been consulting with Jesus Christ, and that Jesus had been helping with the dimensional merge, which would be finished in the near coming days. But without giving an actual set date, Chris also mentioned that Jesus had been preaching this at churches and in Pokemon gyms. No, he hadn't. And yet needed Chris to help get the word out by posting to his protected Twitter account. Naturally, after indulging his fantasies on the matter, Chris immediately started begging for money. As July 2019 began, Chris tried to demonstrate his divine abilities through psychic powers, a pair of videos in which Chris drops items from his hand by the Ideomotor effect. On the 8th of June, he tried to assure his true and honest believers on Twitter that the merge's effects would be mild and temporary, and continued his long trend of attributing random events in the news as harbingers of the merge. On the 10th of July, Chris, via his Magi-chan sock puppet on Twitter, complained about the many uninspired trolls who had tried to take advantage of the merge to exploit Chris. This has not prevented others, such as the multidimensional White Knights or one Jacob Sockless, from attempting to weasel their way into Chris's inner circle. To advance his belief in the merge, Chris has resorted to using sock puppet accounts on Twitter, most prominently Magi-chan 111448, to broadcast events, whether he is using this as a transparent disguise, or to convince others, or he generally thinks that he is channeling his cartoon character's thoughts and statements into a microblogging platform, is unclear. On the 14th of August 2019, Magi-chan would announce that he has allegedly arrived into the real world and would presently describe in a video that the merge's status. In a Discord message on November 2019, Chris was still pinning for the merge, or pining I should say, I do apologise, stating, "As for getting me into C197, that has to happen ASAP." In March 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Chris believed it to be a sign of the impending merge. On the 29th of December 2020, Chris announced that the merge is on. Later in the day, Chris stated that the merge is on. His post was in reference to an Apex event, most likely referring to him attempting to break the Iron Curtain. The next day, Chris went into further detail alluding to the merge happening on New Year's Day 2021. When New Year's Day came and went, Chris clarified he meant the merge would happen any moment at the present time, meaning very soon after the New Year. On the January 22nd, Chris announced that the merge would be completed, making it the third time he had claimed the merge would happen at a specific time. So later, back on the 30th of October 2020, Chris, pretending to be Sonichu, stated he could not get Chris's body back to C-197 and Chris and Sonichu's soul stopped, Chris could not return to 1218. Bit concerning, but when Chris and Sonichu swapped on the 25th of February 2021, Chris was expecting the merge to happen on that day because of the swap, which is why he said, "The dimension merge is happening, know which universe you're in, when are suddenly transported peoples." This would be the fourth time Chris has claimed the merge would happen at a specific date. Due to the merge not happening on the 25th of February and My Little Pony G5 movie screenshots being leaked, Chris decided to leave Twitter to remain in his cognitive dissonance. Predictably, this commitment to leave the website lasted only a single day. On the 9th of March 2021, Chris claimed that 1218 and C-197 were one combined dimension in the past, but King Arthur and other kings used magic to separate the combined dimensions and send all known magic to C-197. Cuckoo, the merge, as it's happening. Chris has written in a 25th of May 2022 letter directed towards Kenneth Engelhardt, telling him that he believed that the dimensional merge has already happened, and as a result of all the people he's deemed as toxic, has suddenly evaporated. As he later learned, this was not the case. Post-merge era. During his arrest on the 1st of August 2021, Chris declared that the merge is on, once again possibly believing that it will get him out of jail. In a series of letters addressed to a number of individuals penned during his incarceration, Chris has continued to maintain his beliefs in the merge, even as he incorporated several aspects of Christianity and biblical references into his ever-shifting mythos. Despite his apparent newfound faith in God and his self-identification as a living reincarnation of Jesus himself, he has consistently kept his title of CPU Blueheart, making numerous allusions allusions to his belief in the merge across all of his letters. In his first widely publicized message from jail, he claimed the merge was completed and concluding, echoing similar beliefs in his second missive. Most notably, in the third letter from jail addressed to a Ween attempting to convert him to Islam, he states that the merge is completed, with only the failing Earth of his home dimension awaiting eventually incorporation into Chris's OC-infested utopia. While some expected his time behind bars to educate him, Chris has evidently chosen to further ensconce himself with his imaginary world, likely doubling down on the merge's use as a coping mechanism in the belief that it will rescue him from his imprisonment and probable conviction. The merge's future closure, of course, is subject only to Chris's whims, and it is not dependent on Chris's deteriorating finances, his aged mother's declining health, or any events in 1218. Originally supposed to be complete within a few months of its announcement, it is now nearly complete and yet continues to be pushed further into the future, as nothing in Chris's world objectively changes except the identities of his enabling rivals for incompetence. Whether Chris will abandon his belief in the merge in the event of some external shock like Bob's death and its fallouts, or retreat even further into it, is something only time can tell. Judgment Day, the Second Coming, and the collective shift. As he was being arrested, as you do, Chris noted that, in his mind, the merge was almost complete, as he denied the reality settling in that he'd be thrown into the brig for a very long time. Some anticipated that with enough time away from the internet and left purely to his own devices, Chris might come to realize the truth. However, instead of being a wake-up call, Chris's reignited interest in the Bible instead caused him to retreat even further into his fantasies, believing himself to be Jesus Christ reincarnated. Over many correspondences from jail, Chris outlined a judgment day where the following 3 events are supposed to occur. 1. The continuation of the dimensional merge. 2. The collective shift, where all of the good and neutrals in the world will be sent to C-197, and the haters, referred to in ramblings as the toxic minority, will be left behind on a doomed world as the rapture occurs. And 3. The second coming, where Chris will descend from the Temple of Sonichu and personally carry out the collective shift, as well as rescue buildings and artifacts he happens to like. While that one did eventually happen, it was merely Chris's return to the internet. After this second coming, Chris began to blame Russia for the delays, especially the Russo-Ukrainian war, which just so happened to begin on Chris's 40th birthday. Yeah, the trigger, and this was not influenced by the idea guys, shockingly enough. The trigger for the war was, of course, Putin personally pitching My Little Pony G5. That was something Chris seems to believe in now, apparently, specifically invented to be Russian propaganda. Chris has later stated that if Hasbro was to cancel the series, make 5 more series of Generation 4, and remake G5 from the ground up, World War III would end and the merge would also continue. I wish I was joking, but no, it's borderline one of the most insane bits of I know I've been with... Listen, it's ironic because 2019 was round about the time when I started to know Chris fairly regularly through like Dylan Thomas and Gibby, and I'm still shocked that even to this day, when you hear stuff like this, that it is so incredibly insane, so incredibly deranged, that I'm beginning to wonder whether or not I'm even calling myself like insane as well, because for some reason I'm listening to it. I know it's bullshit, don't get me wrong, but he is that into it, and he's, like I said, in the trade we call it going all in, and either Chris will just straight up stop talking about it, or he will do something stupid again, and things will go from bad to worse, as they always do whenever it comes to Chris. So, look out for that. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to look forward to seeing all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Hello, good evening, boo, etc. I hope every one of you is enjoying this good Easter Sunday, and there are plenty of, I decided I was wanting to actually bundle a lot of Chris's religious posts almost entirely into this specific day, because, well, for reasons I want to get into, ladies and gentlemen, and this is something that is affecting Chris, as we speak right now, is that Chris is under the delusions that he is Jesus Christ, which I'll get into a little bit more about that, because I wanted to talk about that issue very, very individually, on its own. But outside of calling yourself Jesus Christ, which is a can of worms in itself, there is a slightly more pressing issue I wanted to cover. That's the whole Messiah complex. And fortunately enough, there is an article just about this, so let's get to it. Now, first of all, health disclosure. This article contains in-depth discussion of Chris's physical and or mental health. This page is not to be construed as a substitute for medical advice or a professional diagnosis. All diagnoses are either taken from outside documentation or based on amateur analysis. I do have a job, dipshit. It is literally called being a literal goddess and protecting as many of your sorry hides from the casualties of the dimensional merge in progress. Even though Chris apparently stated that roughly half the Earth's population is going to survive the merge, so that could literally run into the cases of literally every 1 in 2 people So I don't exactly know how Chris is going to protect people from that. I don't know how he could do that. Also, he can't do that anyway because the dimensional merge is not real. I know I'm going to have to keep bringing this up, ladies and gentlemen, but it's a good way to be reminded of the fact that, you know what, remember, this is the real world and not this imaginary world Chris thinks he lives in, as though he doesn't live in the same reality as us. I have my morals, especially being the full reincarnation of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and God of all, including you. And by the way, Chris said that while he was sitting in jail on charges of incest. So, consider whether or not you think Jesus Christ is the sort of person you want to follow as a result of allegations of incest, among other things. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't believe in Jesus Christ, but I would like to imagine that actually some people are fully capable of understanding that Jesus would not have committed incest. I didn't think I would ever have to say that, but here we are. A Messiah complex is the mental state of those who believe they are or will become saviors. Chris started demonstrating symptoms of this type of psychosis alongside his worsening narcissism and increase in maladaptive coping mechanisms. In the later half of the 2010s, Chris increasingly started restoring to his fantasy world as a way of coping with the pressures of reality. And, after being influenced by the idea guy's cult-like grip, who utilized a parody series about video game deities to manipulate Chris, he gradually built up a belief that these deities really existed in another dimension, and copied the lore about them to make up an imaginary counterpart of himself with their powers. CPU Blueheart. Chris also attempted without success to orchestrate a dimensional merge, to unite himself with said counterpart to gain an array of godlike powers, also money, because Chris's house was in danger of foreclosure during this time, because of the $6,000 that Chris... I think it was roughly about $6,000 that the idea guys actually extorted from Chris. But it could easily be as much as maybe $10,000 for all we know. At least to this point. As a maladaptive coping mechanism against his bleak life. Following his arrest in August 2021 and subsequent internment, Chris's Messiah complex turned literal. Possibly influenced by the Bibles given to prisoners in jail, Chris began referring to himself as Jesus Christ and God, even signing a letter as Mrs. Jesus Christine Weston Chandler Sonichu, the Goddess Blueheart and Lord of All. It's going to be a little bit hard getting mail with a name like that. Chris also refers to himself as Real Player One in his prison letters, which can be interpreted as a belief that he is the most important being in existence. If not a sign of full-blown, albeit non-philosophical solipsism, either way, it can be assumed that Chris views the majority of humankind as beneath him, although the most likely he did till well before going completely cuckoo. And in later events where Chris is trying to preach with some orchestrated evidence conjured up by trolls on the Chris-chan subreddit and among other such platforms, that Hasbro was in cahoots with the Russians as to why My Little Pony Generation 5 is was disliked by Chris, I should say. I have no opinions about the show whatsoever. So there's that. The origins of the Messiah complex. Chris's Messiah complex grew out of two already existing problems he had, namely his narcissism and his maladaptive coping mechanisms. One is to neglect Chris's accountability for anything he does, and Chris to justify said unaccountability by creating scenarios and realities where Chris can only be the one to be right. He can never be wrong in that case. Since before his discovery, Chris believed he had magic powers. He used to curse people he didn't like, mostly men, and bless people he did like, mostly women. Due to trolls acting like these curses actually worked, Chris got the confirmation that some of his powers were real. He also thought God and Jesus had a special interest in his life and were appearing in his dreams to help him. That's slightly more, I'd say, more wishful thinking, but I think we've sort of covered a little bit about that ourselves. In his comics, Chris gave himself godlike powers to beat up the people he didn't like and change real-life situations where he was punished by authorities to a situation where he won against the authorities, i.e. a Mary Sue. For a long time, Comic Chris and Real Chris were separate individuals, in Chris's mind. But with the coming of the Idea Guys and the TT Squad, I should also just, before we go any further, the reason why I call it the TT Squad is because somebody did point out to me a couple of weeks ago that this word right here, TROON, this word is actually considered a slur against people who are transgender. Though I don't. Well, this is from what somebody pointed out to me. I don't know if I've gotten like any other information from those people who are actually transgender, but if you know anything at all about these group of individuals, you'll know that they are not maybe the greatest people in the world either, and anyone who wants to be associated with Chris in real life, there's got to be some ulterior motives or something's going on that we're not seeing, as history has shown us, and also why would anyone want to hang out with Chris anyway? That's the point. The line between reality and fiction got blurred, and he mixed himself and his self-insert up. As he had to prove to the fans that his newfound magic powers were real, he came up with the most rational solution he could think of, the dimensional merge. This helped blow his Messiah complex out of proportion. The dimensional merge, and yes, don't worry ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be a full-blown article about this as well, because in terms of things that Chris has conjured up by himself and has literally run havoc over his own life, look no further than Dimensional Merge. It's almost like the second coming of the Sonichu comics about where Chris's descent into infamy like truly began. The merge is a concept where two dimensions, one where Chris is a loser and another where he is a god, are merging, where the end result is a single Chris with godlike powers. The Idea Guys created the concept of the merge, and Chris immediately believed it because it provided an explanation as to why his powers are being activated after 36 years of his miserable existence. This was most likely created as a means of coping from his life, where he was the man of the house and had to take care of his mother, pay bills, and do tasks that he considers to be stressful. He also uses the merge to justify why he does nothing daily and to give himself hope that things might get better in the future. To stroke his ego and get confirmation that his godlike powers are being activated, he made his fictional characters worship him. For him, these characters are living, and their worship is equivalent to worship by actual people. Seeing this, many enablers also started worshipping him and created a religion based on him to get on his good side. Due to all this reaffirmation, in his beliefs, he started thinking he is a god. And Jesus reborn. In the wake of Chris being arrested and incarcerated on a charge of incest, awaiting legal proceedings, viewers watched with bated breath in anticipation of what would happen next. Many thought that time in jail would serve to humble Chris, imparting unto him an inescapable awareness of his wrongdoing and forcing him to understand that actions had consequences. No, that didn't happen. For over a month, there was near total radio silence, and for a time, people believed that Chris had finally had a reckoning in being forced to face reality. On September 19th, 2021, these notions were swiftly put to rest, as Chris added another layer of delusion to the many that grew of his unchecked long-term psychoses. While not the first jail letter written by Chris, that being a brief plea for money in August shortly after his incarceration, the message sent on September 19th was wildly different in both tone and content, reading more like a sermon than a cry for help. Chris declared himself as a reincarnation of Jesus of Nazareth as he defended his actions, and fulminated against those who had betrayed him. Having come to view himself as the single most important being in existence, christening himself, no pun intended, as the real Player One, the effective center of the entire universe, many of the messages that followed sent to assorted acquaintances, old friends, and YouTube channel owners, among others, served to demonstrate the scope of his new outlook. Chris would use letters to elaborate on his feelings towards others, or provide lore for his confusing self-made pantheon, all the while assuring his readers of his godly status and insisting vehemently that the dimensional merge was coming ever closer, nearing completion by his own hands, and insisting with equal vehemence that his actions towards Barb were not criminal, but an act of soul bonding, designed to protect her and prolong her life. Chris's belief in his own godhood became such that he eventually convinced himself that he would simply be released from jail without consequence to tend to his duties. Following the completion of the merge, a belief he held right up until his last known communique prior to his transfer, and well after he returned from his court-mandated hospital stay. Many believed that his stay at the mental ward in jail would help with his mental problems, but it wouldn't be the case. On the 3rd of May 2023, a cashier for Earthbound Trading Incorporated has shown Chris's receipt, on which he signed himself as J. Christ Chan Sonichu. Ever since then, recent developments appear to prove that Chris's religious fervour has only intensified. On the 16th of October, on the day of the Second Coming, very subtle there, Chris, he returned to the online world in an earnest with a rambling, directionless mixture of song parodies and incoherent babbling, in which he trotted out yet more vague and nonsensical terminology that only hints at the continued erosion of his mental state. This carried over into his next address, wherein he directly referred to himself once again as the reincarnation of Jesus and the one avatar of all existence, implying that he was given divine full knowledge of the incest leaks, attributing his arrest to divine intervention, and once more claiming innocence by saying he was incarcerated thanks to the actions of other entirely unrelated people. Over the next several months, he continued to refer to himself as Jesus Christ's Western Chandler Sonichu Prime, renamed the Christian Love Day to Spiritual Love Day, and blessed people for money on live streams. And for some reason, people decided to give Chris money. Don't do this, ladies and gentlemen. That's just my preference. How this dramatic change in his mindset occurred is uncertain, though it is commonly believed that combined with Chris's existing fascination with the dimensional merge and an inability to cope with the consequences of his actions, Chris's voracious readings of the Bible in isolation has served to instill within him a deep religious fervour, driving him to create a nonsensical mythology that he has since used as yet another coping mechanism, one that threatens to completely destroy what tenuous ties to reality he still has left. It also serves as a logical next step to Chris's delusions of godhood, given that Chris already treated himself as a messiah of his fantasy world. He simply added a reincarnation element to it, and joined a list of many other delusional people who believe that they are Jesus of Nazareth reincarnated. It appears as if the only thing keeping him from a mental institution is his autism, which he claimed to have cured with his godly powers. And finally, examples of his Messiah complex. Phrases such as, "Oh my, Chris Chan," and "Chris Chan Sonichu is watching over you," replacing the word God with his nickname. Asked people to try and pray for him multiple times. Has said he looks over others' lives to make sure no bad happens to them, though one person he was looking over did get divorced. Womp frigging womp, Chris. Claims to make sure many people don't die of diseases. I don't know exactly how he could have done that. I've probably done more to save people. No, again, I know I've brought this up before, ladies and gentlemen, but, I was working throughout the pandemic, specifically to make sure people did not catch COVID-19, and to make sure people didn't die from COVID. I've done more to save the people's lives from diseases than Chris has done. What on earth is Chris talking about? Believing that he is straight up Jesus Christ of Nazareth reincarnated. So, shit, yeah. Now, to be honest, that is kind of it for now, because the reason why I wanted to bring this whole issue of a Messiah complex up is that, well, yes, demonstrating his megalomania. you should check out the song, by the way, Megalomania by Black Sabbath. It's literally one of the greatest songs they've ever done. But again, to sort of just give you my overall feelings about what Chris's Messiah complex comes across as, it's just about the only thing Chris has to suggest that maybe he was not the one who was actually in the wrong about anything he's done. Which, again, now listen, even before all of these things happened, is that people already didn't particularly like Chris and didn't really want to have anything to do with Chris, and that Chris is not a representation of certain communities, like, you know, people with autism, or people who like My Little Pony, or people who are transgender or part of the LGBTQ plus community. But it's even the sort of thing that even detract people from actually wanting to make sure that Chris is like safe, or people forgive him and stuff like that, because this all comes across as the only way, or one of the only ways, in which Chris could be forbidden from the idea that he would have to accept that these things have like taken place. And these are the only things that, again, if people were not paying attention to Chris, this probably wouldn't have happened anyway. So what exactly is the right way to like conclude this video? Is it the idea? Well, first of all, do not pray to Chris. Chris is not a god. Secondly, if you really believe Chris is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, he isn't. And third, one could only wonder exactly how long this charade is going to last before Chris either gets bored of it and simply says he's stopped being Jesus Christ, or whether or not it's just people get so bored with it that Chris decides that, well, the dog has had its day, you could say. Bear in mind, Chris spent a large part of 2020 claiming to be Sonichu, the original prime of the species, and this was done just because. And again, but nobody was bothering to like pay any attention to this, because a lot of people just saw Chris, by the increased popularity of the Geno Samuel documentary series, that they just saw Chris as just attention seeking, and that because there's absolutely nothing else he could actually offer to society, then he may as well establish an entire society of his own, which he had pretty much been doing for years at that point, except, well, through out of sense of worship and pray. But I pray to God that this sort of thing just ends and Chris just decides, well, that's it, and buggers off somewhere else. Or who knows, he might even be going back to jail. We know, okay, now, with that being said, it's, unless Chris actually does anything to suggest the idea of him going back to jail, that's one thing. But it will also be worth noting about if Chris does go back to jail again, and surely, again, even in the eyes of the courts, the jails, they'll know exactly who Chris is, and they know a little bit more about, well, whether you want to, how much influence do you think people will be like, well, the police or the law will take an interest in this, is a multitude of issues. For the fact that, for the starter, the quickie is a Wikipedia style entry, means that, which to my knowledge, people have the ability to change at will, so the police could easily accuse the actual validity of the things that the article is written in relation to Chris. But what about the other things that can't be faked? The things that, again, Geno Samuel points out. So, well, what's the case here, ladies and gentlemen, is that how are you going to get through the mind of somebody who has decided not to listen? And that's basically the thing with Chris is, and pretty much the whole point of this entire Messiah complex and the dimensional merge, is that Chris refuses to listen. He refuses to listen to what people have said, that he's in the wrong for what he's done. And, well, what do you make of that? Not very much, you may possibly say, but people haven't had much nice things to say about Chris for years. Do you think Chris will actually, pay attention to these things? Or is it just safe to say that, well, it is what it is, and we'll just wait and see when the next stupid thing Chris does is. So, there you go. And with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this, and I will see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, a couple of things I need to explain before we actually get going is that we're going to do some slightly shorter articles for the next couple of days. The reason's because I am completely worn out, because earlier today I actually volunteered to do about 5.5 hours of work, specifically manual labour, but as a result I got injured while I was at work, and if you can see, like, my wrist here is that a stack of chairs fell against me and they pinned my hand against a marbled table, and it twinges a little bit here and there. It's nowhere near as bad as it was 2 hours ago. Sorry, 3 hours ago. Good lord, where does the time fly? And, well, that's the only explanation I have up my sleeve, so it is what it is. So, with that being said, however, Chris's magical thinking. The spirit of Paddy will have his soul for dinner tonight. She will be haunting your nightmares, Mr. Larry. Chris, in his aspect, is a horrendous joke. It seems a little bit extreme to have, like, the ghost of your dog saying that she's going to devour somebody, but that's going a bit farther, isn't it? I also believe in psychic powers. Have been developing some for myself with binaural beats. I am literally bending paper with my mind waves, and I can only get better with daily practice. I would use my powers for good, including the possibility of levitating myself to fly. Chris suggesting that's good. Those are good for what? And by the way, this is Chris's emails to Doopy Duo, which was basically the beginnings of Chris thinking there were such things as alternate dimensions. So that's generally a good indicator as to, like, how far we've come and how far out to sea Chris has gone. Magical thinking is the belief that one's own thoughts and rituals can influence reality. The behavior is common with young children in the egocentric stage of development until they age out of it after developing cognitive thinking. Chris, on the other hand, maintained a habit of magical thinking well into adulthood. Examples. Curses. While Chris has used the Kamehameha in reality, he never took it too seriously, at least until he used it on Liquid Chris in a video. With the kidnapping of Liquid, he then realized that he had the power really to curse people. He also developed a new ability to bless people via the Forgiveness Blessing skill, though his attempts at trying to forgive people are very, very, not really, to say the least. He honestly seems to believe that these powers are real, even stating in one video that if it works, then he knows he has the power. Chris later stated in a music video that if people antagonize him, they will be cursed, but if you're true and honest, you will receive blessings. The most notorious example is the Kamehameha, a power that supposedly bestows terrible fortune upon the recipient. Chris has performed this curse on innumerable occasions, both over the internet and in public. He has even retracted the curse, albeit reluctantly, on at least 3 occasions, with a forgiveness blessing which further cements Chris's belief in its efficiency. Despite the fact that even Chris during this time claimed to be a Catholic and was trying to go about using black magic, which was also something that Mr. Leary pointed out to Chris via a phone call. Healing powers. One of the earliest examples of Chris's magical delusions are the powers of healing. In 2013, he made a post claiming that My Little Pony taught that friendship could provide both magic and healing. In 2018, he would begin to obsess over magical pebbles, with purported healing properties due to interference from the idea guys from mid-2019. Chris would start to believe that he was being possessed by Magi-chan, and as of such could perform many of Magi-chan's magical powers, with one such ability of his being the ability to heal others. He would use his healing touch on Bob, and demonstrated his ability on Art M, the gamer from Mars, in December of that year. Which is this, by the way, Chris demonstrating his healing powers to a bewildered Art M in a strange, unintentional homage to another famous photo. which, well, I may as well just blow the whole thing up anyway, so here it is. Chris, in one of his classic stages of trying not to evacuate himself while standing in his gazebo while Art just looks as though he wish he was anywhere else. Chris's obsession with healing seemed to grow more and more over the years, to the point where he believed he could use his healing abilities regardless of whether he was possessed or not, no doubt contributing to his messiah complex. In 2020, Chris, whilst role-playing as Sonichu, claimed that praying to Chris would cure others of illness and disease. And in 2021, Chris frequently mentioned the phrase self-healing either as a prayer or to describe his own mental state. Whilst the term self-healing is never properly defined by Chris, it's likely meant to just be emotional recovery with a superstitious tinge. Unfortunately, due to recent events, the term has adopted a more sinister meaning. Yeah, I mean, they're not wrong. Voodooism. In Chris's case, he seems to believe that his tirades and tantrums will somehow affect his perceived enemies. His attacks on the clown doll, for instance, are a metaphorical threat, but also suggest an attempt at somehow literally harming the trolls through sympathetic magic, like a voodoo doll. He views his revenge against his enemies in the comic or in Soul Calibur 3 as being equivalent to actual revenge, rather than simply venting. In September 2013, Chris created voodoo dolls out of Lego to represent Megan Schroeder, Michael Snyder, and Mary Lee Walsh, people who refused to cave in to Chris's demands, earning them the title of the top 3 friends and enemies of Chris's lifetime. He derived satisfaction from tormenting the dolls by shaking them in a container and leaving them upside down. Chris again used voodooism as part of his tantrum over Trump becoming president. Upon learning of the election results, he kicked a Transformers toy meant to represent President-elect Trump. Following this, he created effigies of Trump and Vice President pick Mike Pence out of a Lego and hanged him. I wish I could say, well, yeah, exactly. The Spirit Realm. The world of Quickville is also a spirit realm, where Chris is almighty and can create and shape it as he pleases due to his powers of creativity. It exists outside but parallel to the real world, and sometimes Chris seems to have honestly believed that it's a real place even if it's just imaginary. The idea of this spirit realm became more valid when, in a video, Chris claimed that the soul of his dead dog, now living in Quickville, would devour Alec Benson Leary's soul and haunt his dreams forever. Sorcery. Through Chris's perception of God as an instrument of his will comes the delusion that he has magical powers that will permit him to eventually succeed over the enemies that he is unable to dispatch by any more conventional means. Chris's sorcery was among his more egregious behaviours that were not merely atypical of a Christian, but in fact explicitly prescribed by his faith. Galatians 5:19-20 lists witchcraft as one of the more blatant acts of sin, and Exodus 22:18 commands, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." That's right, there's a biblical mandate for Chris's death. But unfortunately, again, it's Chris's day of judgment is not quite upon us yet. Alec Benson Leary, in one of his phone calls with Chris, attempted to point out the thoroughly un-Christian nature of Chris's dabbling in black magic, but his reasoning appeared to have little effect. Of course, his magical practices have only become even more blatant since proclaiming himself a CPU goddess, including threatening trolls on social media with supernatural retribution meted out by himself. Then a short argument on the Dimensional Merge. The Dimensional Merge is Chris's grand set and most convoluted magical thinking to date. The idea guys created the concept and brainwashed Chris into believing it, and he has since made it a major part of his day-to-day life. Chris actually believes he is a goddess who has the ability to merge this dimension, 1218, with alternate dimensions home to every fictional character created, including his very own Sonichu. For Chris, getting to see Sonichu in real life is probably enough to warrant a fantasy of this caliber, though his motivation for the merge is deeply rooted in personal and very real failures. From his financial woes to his lack of a significant other, Chris plans for the dimensional merge to fix his life. Not only will all of Chris's funds from Quickville be transferred to him, his polyamorous marriage to 4 Pokémon will be official. If Chris has a problem, you can bet the merge has a solution for it. Necromancy. Chris also appears to believe that he can, to an extent, talk to the deceased. He told Sarah May that when he touched his dead Aunt Karina's hand, he could hear her spirit, along with the spirits of his grandparents and great-grandparents. He also claimed that God Jesus told him to make the trip and go to Julie. Additionally, Chris believes that he can harness the spirits of the dead to do his bidding, notably when he threatened Megan with revenge by him and his father's ghost, and when he warned Alec Benson Leary that his dead dog would have his soul for dinner and haunt his nightmares. During his time masquerading as Jenkins Jinkies on the Troll and Drain, Chris hoped to dissuade trolls by claiming that his house was haunted, describing an alleged encounter with the vengeful ghost of Paddy and his younger self. Chris apparently believed that trolls would heed this threat. On the 22nd of March 2021, he discussed with an unknown Watchmen member about fantasizing talking with the ghost of Claire Hu, a teenage girl who was murdered on a beach. I don't really know why, and it's probably not going to be explained either way, so moving on. Others. Kamehameha, placing bad luck and extreme misfortune on all of those who give me grief or hate. Forgiveness blessings. Curses all ailments of virus or physical qualities. Ono makes... Oh, what? Am I reading this, guys? I mean... Peaceful teaching immediately coming before... Good lord. Quells all disputes and disagreements within a 1,000-mile radius and turns all weaponry into dust. Come to me, my women. Locates and attracts... Okay, you know what, that's it. Fuck you, I'm not listening to that anymore. Chris's terrifying list of insane list of spells. Meanwhile, he also thinks that he has the power to brainwash people into following his commands, among other latent powers that he may discover when the opportunity presents itself. All of this magic is supposedly powered by his preferred personal relic de jour, either the medallion or the amethyst ring. How these items came to be imbued with magical properties has not been addressed. I pray the soul of my father gives you all nightmares. Chris on using the spirits of the dead. Why on earth would... Nah, I don't think Bob would have enough to do with that. Since 2016, Chris has watched a myriad of subliminal frequency hypnosis videos on YouTube, and believes that the marketed effects of the binaural beats he listens to will actually occur. These videos promise bizarre results, such as attracting love, becoming a hermaphrodite, and learning telekinesis. Throughout the mid-2010s, Chris added several concepts from New Age spirituality to his shamanism, including astral projection and the third eye, using them as methods to visit his imaginary friends. He also took an interest in mystical rocks such as healing crystals, keeping a pouch full of them around his neck, even though it caused him neck pain. Way to go, Chris. Genius level IQ, too much water. More recently, Chris now appears to believe that he can snap objects out of existence, claiming that he had apparently phased out of My Little Pony toys in a Walmart and Target from reality. It's only because, G5 was a thing, so that's the only reason Chris was bringing this up. In a social media post from January 2024, Chris was asked why he couldn't just will the extra episodes of My Little Pony Gen 4 into existence. He simply replied that it takes time. given that Chris is not above trying to talk his way out of questions or situations that bother him. Even at the expense of consistency, this hand wave should be taken with a grain of salt. Psychological analysis. When asked by a fan how he came to learn of his powers, Chris replied they were evidenced by Mary Walsh's reputation going down. I have learned about the curses actually working firstly when I cursed the real-life Mary Walsh. Then I later heard that her reputation at PVCC went down. Yes, mostly due to my references in the pages. But then things got worse for her, and even though I forgave her and her misdeed on interpreting my sweetheart search, I feel she definitely got what she deserved for her misdeed. Later, I cursed one specific troll, I forget who. Shortly later, I learned that that troll came down with a life-threatening ailment. Chris seems to believe this and almost seems proud of what he's done. This is a textbook example of magical thinking. This gives Chris a belief of some degree of power over his own life, no matter how illusionary. This use of fantasy is considered by the psychological community to be an immature defense mechanism. Wow, so again, it never ceases to amaze me that in just about all corners of the earth and in every community you can imagine, Chris is basically outcast before he ever got the opportunity to stalk anyone he laid eyes on. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the entirety of Chris's magical thinking. Probably the only thing he could have relied on, since, at any realm of actual thought concrete to this world was just too much for Chris to handle. But I hope I can handle on you guys for sticking around and checking me out in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Yeah! Oh! Welcome all of you back to another Chris Chan Quickie article, where tonight we're reading, and this is Chris's imaginary friends. Well, I hope you like them, Chris, because they are the only friends you are going to have left. True story, and if you don't believe me, well, wait until you see what he's got, because even the people he keeps don't want to even be his friends. How does that work? I don't know, but we're gonna find out. He sees them with his third eye, but longs to see them in real life. An idea guy on Chris's perception of his imaginary friends. Imaginary friends are psychological manifestations typically employed by toddlers to practice social skills. Most children grow out of the phase. Chris, on the other hand, retained his belief in imaginary friends well into adulthood, still holding the belief at 42 years of age. Chris has always had difficulties distinguishing fiction from reality due to his autism. His imaginary friends were originally an occasional source of companionship, as well as a coping mechanism for moments of stress, such as the infamous example of invoking Sonichu to Mary Walsh during his college days. As he entered his mid-30s, Chris retreated more often to his imaginary world as a reaction to the downward spiral of his life, ignoring the real-world problems of his debt and lack of independent living experience, resulting in a vicious feedback loop in which Chris's real-world problems worsen while his devotion to his imaginary friends increases. The machinations of the idea guys and the enablers that followed, whose chief tactic is role-playing as Chris's imaginary friends, further cemented the belief into Chris's mind. Chris's devotion to his imaginary friends outweighed his real-life friendships with his Pokémon League friends, and he gradually lost contact with the latter to focus on his fantasy world. How Chris interacts with his imaginary friends. Yeah, no word of a lie. I'll tell you something, like, to be honest, and I'll just, again, we're going to pause just for a quick moment, is that Chris is not even the craziest person I've ever known. I think, to be honest, somebody in Chris's scenario, I think where Chris is, like, shit out of luck when it comes to, actual friendships and stuff like that. So it only seems more natural that he could create friends that will like him because of who he is. Because we know who Chris is, and yeah, that creates a healthy dose of problems. But earlier today, like, no joke, I was literally on my way home because I was doing, like, piecework at my job and stuff like that. And literally, coming past, like, Eldon Square, there was, like, a black woman with like, her shirt off, and she had, like, no bra on. And she was, like, on her knees, like, screaming something in gibberish. It literally... and she, like, in front of, like, that small little zebra crossing where the buses come past and stuff like that. Anyway, she was hollering some gibberish. Then she literally crawls forward, lies flat on the road, and people either tell her to shut the fuck up, or they literally try to get, like, Eldon Square staff in just to get her to stand up and actually, put a damn shirt back on. But I'm telling you now, I don't know what on earth was going on in her mind and all that, but I must say, Chris has never gone off the edge enough to do stuff like that. And considering we know more about Chris, I can only imagine that whatever that woman was going through, it must have been past imagining compared to whatever the hell problems we know of Chris. Which suggests that I think Chris has more of a cognitive grasp on the ideas that, for the most part, he keeps his ideas to himself outside of those who want to play into his delusions. Which, they may be delusionary to us, but they're probably not to Chris, if that makes sense. Chris is confused over the concept of imagination, interpreting it as visions into the dimension where his friends reside. In a 2010 email to Jackie, Chris said that he communicated with imaginary friends before falling asleep, essentially describing a form of daydreaming. I do still sometimes talk with my electric hedgehog Pokémons while I'm on my way to falling asleep and the TV is off. We talk about current things, like things I could do or say in meeting new people, or just things I'm feeling currently to get their response to. Chris in the Jackie emails. So this is like a sort of thing that goes as far back as 2010, probably even further back still, when the internet was discovering Chris, and Chris was still quite unhinged back in the day. Chris tapped into New Age spirituality to try strengthening his perceived ties to the other dimension, with techniques centered around meditation. In the summer of 2017, he began referring to a third eye, a concept associated with mental visions and precognition. He also experimented with astral projection, a term for an outer-body experience achieved with meditation, as a method to access Quickfill, and later Dimension C-197. In the fall of 2017, the first of the idea guys entered the picture, role-playing as Chris's own imaginary friends, initially to see if he was gullible enough to believe it. From Chris's perspective, he thought that he was addressing his friends over the internet instead of having an astral project. This validated Chris's beliefs, because that didn't take much to convince him, and his faith in imaginary friends consequently escalated to the forefront of his life. I pretended to be Sonichu and Rosechew, who borrowed my computer. All it took was a little knowledge on Sonichu, and Chris believes he's talking to his children. The ringleader of the idea guys. So, was this either Joshua Moon or the other dude? Anyway. After the idea guys were ousted due to using their influence to extort Chris, various enablers crawled out of the woodwork and copied their techniques, keeping Chris firmly rooted in his fantasy land. As to why, it could only be assumed the only reason why they would even want to do this was just for Chris to be entertaining, and so he can make an absolute ass out of himself for shits and giggles, but like back in the old days. Except things have escalated and are a lot more sinister because of certain events which we'll get to. Chris has tried to physically interact with fictional characters. During BronyCon of 2017, an inconspicuous observer recorded him dancing with Magi-chan, in reality having thin air as his dance partner. In January 2019, Chris claimed on Twitter to have been attacked by an imaginary enemy while in the shower, and that he was able to whack the attacker with a half-full conditioner bottle. Whether that actually happened, I have no idea. In April 2019, Chris was spotted by a fan at Target muttering really loudly. From Chris's perspective, he had been hanging out with his imaginary friends. Chris also believes in spirit possession, involving his imaginary friends, such as when he believed that Hyperdimension Neptunia character Uzume and his OC Magi-chan had possessed his body. Accounts of said manifestations. Sonichu. During a 2004 confrontation with Mary Lee Walsh, Chris began to converse with Thin Air, pretending that Sonichu was in the office with him. Chris then pretended to be Sonichu, giving a speech that he claimed Sonichu wanted to give Walsh, before ending the lecture with a Kamehameha, since he believes he has magic powers. Unsurprisingly, Mary ordered him to see a psychiatrist. No, you know what, forget a psychiatrist. I would have suggested the only thing Chris needed was a good hiding. That would get him to keep quiet about this stuff. Chris has also conversed with Sonichu and Rosechew before falling asleep. At one point, he claimed that the pair offered him relationship advice. And surprise to absolutely nobody, they must have given really shitty advice, because guess what? It hasn't manifested anything. All it's done is manifested in humiliation, degradation, and 2 years in prison. Magage Le Skunk. He claimed to have conversed with Magage Le Skunk, particularly regarding how she has allegedly told him that she, Megan, but now by extension Magagi, should never have been born. Nightstar. Chris believes that he has overheard conversations held by Nightstar and other random My Little Pony characters. In 2017, Chris also used his Nightstar account on Twitter to talk to himself, even after revealing that Nightstar was a sock puppet of his. Magi-chan. The prime member of Chris's imaginary friends, having surpassed Sonichu and Nightstar in importance to Chris, as Magi-chan's abilities center around psychic powers, which Chris deems useful in his misguided attempts to correct his real-world problems. Magi-chan's rise in status began around the summer of 2017, when Chris believed Magi-chan was with him at BronyCon, to the point that he danced with Thin Air at the BronyCon gala, believing his dance partner was Magi-chan. Cuckoo. Magi-chan's importance to Chris has made him a key for others to use in manipulating him. The idea guys duped Chris into believing he was married to Magi-chan. The captain invoked Magi-chan to convince Chris to trust him to stop the idea guys. Jacob Sockless deceived Chris with a faked chat log involving Magi-chan, and various enablers have used Magi-chan to get their foot in the door with Chris. Discord. To do that, we're going to have to actually take a look at the full story about the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Discord. They should just call it Friendship is Dead, because everything is dead when it comes to Chris. Innocence, dead. The truth, dead. Feelings of dead. All of it. Trying to meet Neptune at GameStop. An idea guy told Chris that fictional Hyperdimension Neptunia character Neptune would be waiting for him at a GameStop during December 2017. Chris opted to go to the Forest Lakes location from which he had been banned, and on his own initiative stood outside and thoroughly scanned the interior looking for Neptune, then followed up by honking on his car horn and shouting her name. Now, once again, because there is no real footage or evidence, we have no idea if Chris really did this, but there you are. In fact, actually, to be honest, maybe Chris did do this, because the more I'm thinking about it, what does Chris have to gain exactly by suggesting that all of this is real? I know, but and that's the thing. The only thing Chris is trying to gain through all this is that he has people who actually like him. I think that's the only reason why he's even bothering to do this. Is it? I don't know, but what do you guys reckon? Polyamorous marriage. During January of 2018, the idea guys rewrote Sonichu law so that Magi-chan and his father figure Mewtwo were married. 2 months later, they convinced Chris that he was married to Magi-chan and their OC Crizzle in a bisexual polyamorous marriage. As you do. The notion stuck with Chris, who declared his real-life love quest to be over. In June, long after the idea guys were ousted, Chris widened the marriage to officially include Mewtwo and Sylvana, Magi-chan's other partner. Chris has frequently mentioned his imaginary husbands and wives on social media, by posting messages written from their points of view. having Magi-chan deliver the news that Chris went to the hospital. He should have stayed there, if you ask me, but there you are. Claiming to be with them, stating that Sylvana helped him diagnose a problem with his car. Why could Sylvana do that? I didn't realize she was a mechanic now. Or referring to them as if they were real, saying his hubby 2, Mewtwo, helped him out in the events from the Detective Pikachu movie. Hubby 2, let's see, I swear to God, I just want to fucking kill myself for hearing Hubby 2. I mean, guys, I've heard a lot of very cringy shit with Chris over these last couple of weeks, but Hubby 2? I mean, whatever. Religious figures. Chris has long believed that religious and spiritual figures like God and the Grim Reaper give him messages in the form of dreams, not realizing the dreams are merely expressions of his own subconscious desires. During the Idea Guy saga, an Idea Guy roleplayed as Jesus to troll Chris. As well as seen in the Quizelle Torture chat log, validating Chris's egocentric beliefs that religious figures would seek to contact him. Well, I'll say this about the Idea Guys, Chris certainly needed Jesus. But apparently just Chris decided that he didn't need him as much as he thought he did. During the subsequent dimensional merge, Chris took his beliefs to the next level, believing that various deities were his imaginary friends helping with the merge. The CPUs who I am friends with, as well as God/Amuel and Jesus of this dimension. Distress over fictional characters. Chris uses his imaginary friends to find solidarity with changes to fictional media that he dislikes. The initial design of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie was disliked by Chris, who claimed to have discussed the matter with Sonic, whose opinion was that the movie does no good justice for him. When long-running cartoon My Little Pony Friendship is Magic wrapped up initial production, Chris was so upset and tried to convince Hasbro to continue the show, claiming to have consulted with Princess Celestia, a character from the cartoon, aka a fictional character. And things got so insane regarding this that Chris, earlier this year, was under the illusion through some falsely created accounts and reports that Hasbro was in cahoots with the Russians to make My Little Pony Generation 5. And Chris believed every single word of it. Because after 20 years now, probably even longer than that, Chris will only ever listen to things that he wants to hear. Things that will validate the bullshit that goes on in this world. And it doesn't surprise me, because this is the sort of thing that will go on until Chris is well into his 50s. Then again, with his condition and his health, is 50 even feasible for Chris? It probably is, but what will Chris even say when that happens? Coping with people who distance themselves. Chris has used the concept of imaginary friends to cope with people who explicitly don't want to put up with him. In January of 2019, several members of the Brony community blocked Chris's Twitter en masse. Chris tried to cope by role-playing an apology between his alter ego and the alter egos of the Bronies, in which the latter apologizes to Chris for blocking him, and then proceeded to take the roleplay seriously, sending the apology drawings out in a failed attempt to convince the Bronies to unblock him. In December of 2019, Chris threw a tantrum over Artist Project SNT's redesign of his Wild Sonichu character, later rationalizing his reaction as the result of Dimension CS-89 calling him for help. Chris tried to get Project SNT to respond to his power fantasy, but she refused to act as an enabler and ignored him. Thank you, SNT. Since she didn't want to interact with him, Chris appropriated her as an imaginary friend, declaring that she had been force-transported to Dimension CS-89 to assist him with battling interdimensional evil there. You know what? That was such a stupid thing I've just read. I almost feel like I need to, I need to give... You know what? Guys, I'm going to just do a quick question down below. I've got an entire pound coin in my fingers right here. I will donate it to the very first charity people suggest down below, because I feel like, what the hell did I just read? Take your pick. I'll literally post it to the very first charity posted. MISC coping mechanisms. In June 2021, when Chris was about to leave the Watchmen Discord server, the place, and by extension cut ties with Megan, he stated to know that he first had to confirm Night V's safety and being from Megan. But I'm certain Knights and Reeler have his back during uncertain moments, referring to an OC by Megan based on the character Knights from the Nights into Dreams video game. Okay, so Miscellaneous. I to be honest, I didn't realize MK on Night V was even still, but I have no idea what he's talking about. Robert Chu. Initially, in the years after Chris's father passed away, Chris was in mourning over the loss, accepting that Bob was gone. However, the idea guys manipulated Chris into believing that Bob was alive in Quickfield's dimension, reincarnated as a Sonichu and going by the name Robert Chu. Chris tried to drag his mother into the fantasy of Bob being alive. How could you do that to somebody's own wife or widow? I don't get it, Chris. Having a pose for a photo next to a drawing of Robert Chu for a Twilight Sparkle Secret Shipfic folder card. In the card next, Chris claimed, "Every once in a while, Mr. C runs back home to offer comfort to Barbara. Before the dimension merges completion, she has missed him every day, and found the solace and comfort when he comes by. He continues to carry on a torch for her in his heart and soul while he helps to protect everyone in Quickville and at this old temple of a house." On video, Chris has interacted with his imaginary friends at BronyCon in the fall-winter 2019 with the TT squad while hanging out at a squad member's home. In 2019, Believe in this OCs and Deities, where Chris rambles about nothing and claims that Magi-chan is like next to him. While pretending to be Sonichu, Chris signaled that Rosechu was sitting right next to him as he stated his will on camera. And in the February 2021 video, Chris kisses Rosechu, filmed by Prater, Chris, in this phase of role-playing as Sonichu, kisses an imaginary Rosechu. I don't think it's even worth showing you guys the video footage of any of this, because it essentially role-plays the idea that Chris's OCs are literally possibly part John Cena as well, because I can't fucking see shit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the whole of Chris's imaginary friends. Basically, 20 whole minutes of trying to explain that the only reason why Chris, if these are the only friends that Chris has at all, he better make use with them, because, again, with somebody of Chris's track record, his history, his crimes, all the fucked up shit that he's done over his life, I'm almost surprised that, well, why? What? It's just about the only thing that Chris possibly has left. Sad, but true. And with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this article, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Okay, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and I will say before we get started is that we're coming up to almost like the end of like the first week into May, and it's kind of surprising really that we could be almost halfway through this year and there hasn't been a single day I have failed to actually upload any videos at all. So I don't know if it's just for what it is. It's just, I think it's just sort of like I'm kind of surprised that I've managed to keep it going this long, but don't worry, guys. I promise you there's going to be more guys we're going to be talking about in the coming months. It's just there is so much to talk about with Chris that apparently there's also considered lost media, which, well, I don't know if that's good or bad at this point. So let's go. Chris's imaginary family. Chris has numerous imaginary family members that exist only in C-197. While Chris has put some real-life counterparts into his imaginary world, this article covers those who have been made up entirely by Chris. This page will not cover Sonichu or the Chaotic Combo, however, since they already have their own pages, and while Sonichu does refer to Chris as father or mama, this is more along the lines of Chris being his benevolent creator rather than an actual family. Like most, if not all of Chris's original characters, pretty much all of them exist purely to worship him or to give him extra powers in the comics. Starting with the Cherokee clan leader, or basically Chris's attempts to draw a very, very weedy looking spoon. The leader of the Cherokee clan is a fictional ancestor of Chris, originating from Chris's belief that he is part Cherokee, which was disproven in 2018 after Chris took a 23andMe DNA test. This was during a period of financial crises for Chris, but what can I do? This isn't about that. The character is a Caucasian Aryan man wearing a Roman chest plate Halloween costume, showing how little Chris knew about the people he supposedly descended from. The character looks identical to Chris, who is meant to be his reincarnation. He makes his first appearance in episode 7 of Sonichu issue 2, introducing himself as Chris's ancestor, tells him to kill Crown Graduan, and gives him his Sonichu powers. Fantastic. Crystal Western Chandler, which is meant to be Chris's twin in the comics, but that needs an entire article on its own. So will Paddy-chan. Well, Paddy the dog, but we'll discuss Paddy-chan herself. Paddy Chandler, from the 17th of March 1988 till the 27th of June 2006, was Chris's childhood dog, a Beagle Spitz mix who was put down in 2006, then brought back as a character in Quickville. Paddy grew up with Chris and was the closest thing he had to a sibling. Since his half-brother wanted nothing to do with his family, in a phone call with Clyde Cash, Chris compares the death of Clyde's brother to the death of Paddy, offending Clyde. Chris defended this by stating that Paddy was like a sibling. Chris brought Paddy back to life in Sonichu issue 6 as Paddy-chan, a character created by Megan Schroeder to help Chris cope with the loss of his beloved pet. That's possibly the single nicest thing Megan Schroeder ever did. I'm not even joking. That's actually top notch from Megan. What isn't top notch, however, is how Chris decided to take this, as he usually does, too far. Where she somehow gained the ability to walk, talk, and apply for welfare in Quickville. Because no one has to work, apparently, in Quickville, as you can see right here. Sonichus and Rosechus, again, will need quite a lot to talk about as well. Now, Sonichu we have talked about before, like, in extensive detail, but there's things I need to go for. Being Sonichu's creator, Chris is established as a fatherly figure towards Sonichu, and even has his creation call him father in the comics. Despite there being no relation between the two, nor an origin story for how they even met, in real life, whenever Chris is possessed by Sonichu, he refers to himself as Mama, and when redrawing his cover art for Sonichu issue 0 HD, he made Sonichu call him Mother to match his current female pronouns. Unfortunately, this relationship would become much more disturbing later down the line, with Chris performing several sexual acts on him due to the influence of the trolls, most notably the Idea Guys. You probably don't want to see them, but it's going to happen sooner or later because, well, Chris just has to take things too far as usual. Russell and Cynthia. Back in human form, she extracted some of her essence, then in female Sonichu form, she shot her essence up herself. That was a sentence. After that, when she tried to transform back to human, she could not. She was stuck in her Chris-chan Sonichu form. Then between Magi-chan and her examinations at the hospital, she was knocked up for sure. Yes, the beautiful natural act of consension is about as... It couldn't be any more bastardized than what Chris was going for right there. Russell Sonny and Cynthia Rosie are Chris's fictional Sonny and Rosie children. After Chris's Sonichu form became female to correspond with his newfound female identity, he got the notion to use his own semen to impregnate himself, thus conceiving Russell and Cynthia. Miraculously, neither of the twins emerge as hideous mutants, and Chris proudly insists that they're completely autism-free. Hooray! This little experiment behind him, Chris showed them off to Heather Iglesias, claiming to visit them every now and then. They are first seen in Sonichu issue 12, attending the Quickville Pride Festival with their lesbian nanny. On catching sight of Chris, they immediately run up and cling to him, telling him they miss him. Chris gives them a dismissive "ah" before coldly allowing Heather to take them away. Wow. What on earth do you expect? Chris described the conception again in 2012. She did the fang from between her old cock and moving the spunk into her... I mean, I know we've talked about the fact that Chris's ideas of biology are, well, hideous and more based on fanfiction than anything legitimately related to science, but really? And had to stay stuck in Sonichu form until Russell and Cynthia were born for a few weeks. After that, she went back to her human form, and she had to go through the similar quick process that Roberta went through, but the estrogen was coming in quicker with C-chan, since her old form was now female. Do you even think Chris even understands what he just said? Because I don't. Reginald Chandler. Alternatively, if I have a boy as well, I would name him Reginald. That was not a dream thing though. I've had a past internet girl pal who would have likely become my girlfriend after she got here from her native land of Australia after finishing college there with a teacher degree. We role-played a family day with the children and she chose the name of Reginald for the boy child. This is, by the way, is Reginald, by the way. Reginald Chandler is Chris's imaginary son and brother to his fictitious daughter Crystal. He pees on the ceiling. He is briefly mentioned in chats with Panda. His origins seemingly begin with Panda Halo and her discussions with Chris about the married life they will have in the future. As for Chris, a single date will inevitably lead to a long and happy marriage, even if the two don't even like each other. Although Reginald has been mentioned several times in conversation, he is nothing in comparison to his younger sister in Chris's eyes. Reginald has no persona in the comics, except possibly as Reginald Sneasel, and has never appeared to Chris in a dream. Since the untimely death of Panda Halo, Reginald has not been mentioned outside of direct questioning and a recent video, although it is likely that Chris would still name his hypothetical firstborn son Reginald all the same. Reginald was featured in the Playing House video, where Chris pretends Jackie is the mother of his children. This time, he was depicted as the younger brother to Crystal. While Crystal can write in a diary despite being in preschool, Reginald was mitigated to speaking only in baby babble. The only interaction Chris has with him is complaining about cleaning up the mess he made in the bathroom, changing his diaper, mentioning that he threw up several times during dinner, never stopping to wipe him off, apparently, and demanding he stay quiet for the night so he can fuck his wife in peace. It's interesting to note that Chris mentions that Reginald sits in a booster seat, not a high chair. While it's likely Chris doesn't know the difference, it also implies Reginald is big enough to be a toddler. Being a toddler who can only speak in gibberish suggests he inherited a lot from his father. Probably unintentional, but there it is. In April 2019, future message from Crystal Weston Chandler was uploaded to YouTube, purporting to depict a visit from a time-travelling Reginald. Then, of course, there's going to be a larger article on apparently the daughter of Crystal, so we'll get to that when it comes to it. Could Chris actually have a child? No. Moving on. But let's read this anyway. Maybe. Although it would probably require a fair bit of luck, and the kid is likely to come out being that word. Prior to becoming transgender, Chris's chances of conceiving his God-given daughter were extremely slim, but not impossible. It was at least possible for him to impregnate a woman, however unlikely that would have been owing to obesity's effect on fertility, and rather more pressingly, actually finding a willing female companion. However, or a willing female boyfriend-free girl who would want to have a child with Chris. Same thing, really. However, once Chris began using HRT in sessions, Chris destroyed what fertility he once possessed, rendering the odds of actually conceiving a child at near 0%. While he is on the medication, we can't be quite sure if he is taking it regularly or if in the right amounts. In November 2014, after being rejected by a sperm bank, he even went as far as asking a friend to be the vessel which would allow Crystal to enter the world. But as addressed, he is no longer producing potent sperm. A later video showcased that he has actual difficulty in getting an erection in spite of mass debating for 3 straight minutes, which just adds to his list of problems. In Chris's defense, however, he had just pissed all over the floor, and such an event usually makes it a bit harder to get it up. And he was under distress due to the manipulation of the idea guys, who convinced him that they would only stop torturing his imaginary wife if he made them the sex tape. That being said, some later text-based details of ambiguous authenticity during Chris's soul bonding with his mother in 2021 suggest that he has used his penis to have sex with Barb, although Barb was long since infertile at that point. Chris allegedly wore a condom anyway. It's probably for the better though, as the last thing we need in this world are Barb and Chris having zombie children. In September 2020, Chris explained that he still has interest in getting a sexual reassignment operation in the hopes of being able to give birth. Not happening anytime, Chris. I'm sorry, it's just not. Although he seemingly dropped the idea in the following years, wishing to remain with his genitals for some unknown reason. Because he couldn't afford the actual operation, and then he found out that the closest thing he would actually get to actually conceiving children of his own, he would probably want to take that back immediately. Unfortunately for Chris, those who undergo a male-to-female sexual reassignment surgery are incapable of carrying children. I mean, where's the fetus going to kick off? What's Chris going to do is just keep it in a box. Although some scientists are looking into the possibility of transplanting uteruses into transgender women. That opens up an entire can of worms worth of problems anyway, biologically, but let's keep going. Chris would likely be too old or too unhealthy to bear children in the event of such a breakthrough. And that's all presuming that he could save up enough to pay for that in the first place, which seems like wishful thinking, considering that money seems to be the only thing that Chris can't hoard and he prefers buying Transformers anyway. In short, Chris will die childless, as long as he avoids sinking his finances to the point of foreclosure. The toys that Chris claims to hoard for his future children will go to the state of Virginia if there is no will, and none of his other family members step in. Amen. And haven't just been thrown out by Barb as a result of, prison. Despite Chris trying to hoard again. Should Chris actually have a child? If you are genuinely asking this question, then you really don't know anything about Chris. Parenting is an enormous task that takes huge amounts of effort and competence to pull off correctly. As with Chris himself, even if you have 2 of the most loving parents imaginable, an unhealthy mix of stupidity, coddling, and manipulation can easily turn any child into a monster. First and foremost, Chris is extremely negligent, which is a trait picked up from his parents. Name a thing in his life that he was tasked with taking care of, and you will quickly find that he has left them to rot and rust away. Even with things that he cares about, he doesn't take particularly good care of, and regularly leaves to break because he can't be bothered to take care of anything himself. Children need attention and care, especially during their younger years, when they simply cannot take care of themselves. For example, can Chris successfully potty train a child when he cannot do the same thing with his dogs or even himself? Obviously not. This is only exacerbated by the fact that, paradoxically, despite Chris's obsessive desire to be a parent, he has no actual interest in parenting. In the comics, where he is both mother and father to Russell and Cynthia, he has Heather Iglesias take care of them in lieu of showing them any attention himself, with the two children showing obvious signs of parental abandonment. In Playing House, Chris also makes it rather obvious that he actually intends to neglect his children, with Reginald being allowed to wallow in his own filth and vomit, while having not been taught to speak, while Crystal is expected to take care of herself despite being 4 years old. I'll make a video about this privately, discussing this sort of thing, but it's kind of very interesting because I can name, like, other serious concerns. I mean, listen, I'm not a parent myself, but you know what? I think I would have I'd stand a much better chance of actually being a dad myself. Probably more than anybody would give me credit for. But I'll explain that when the time comes. Children also cost money, and lots of it. Unfortunately for Chris, Virginia is among the top 10 most expensive states to raise a child in, around 8th place at an annual $23,029 a year. Which means that even if Chris was responsible with his money, didn't have an ungodly amount of debt to pay off, and didn't have a group of exploiters taking a giant chunk out of his monthly payments, his livestream money and his monthly tugboat simply wouldn't be able to cover it, and that's assuming he has no other expenses. Also, not to put too fine a point on it, Chris has virtually no aptitude for self-control and anger management whatsoever. Even if you were to argue that past conflicts have proven he is way too passive to assault anyone physically, one lone case apiece of vehicular assault and use of pepper spray notwithstanding, he'll just as easily settle for verbal outbursts and exaggerated temper tantrums in general, which can be scarring to a child as well. As documented, Chris did have a tendency to lose his temper at the smallest provocation and direct it towards young kids during his time when he went to the gameplays on weekends, which, among other bad habits, eventually led to the manager banning him permanently. In fact, what prompted such was Chris getting into a heated verbal dispute with a younger card gamer. Top that off with Chris's insistence that everything he does is doing the right thing, even when it's demonstrably unacceptable, and his near inability to empathize with others nor acknowledge his own errors, only attempting to apologize if he thinks he will get something he wants in exchange for doing so, and you'll have a recipe for what would be at best a strained relationship between Chris and his hypothetical children, if not them escaping and preventing further contact with him altogether, as his half-brother Cole did with Bob. And finally, while in the past it would be considered speculation or something to an A-log would say, even regarding some worrying comments on Facebook, nowadays it's obvious that Chris is okay with questionably consensual incest, especially parental incest between a mother and her child. Regarding his previous comments on Facebook regarding incest with one's own child, he was not only accepting over the act, but actually encouraged it, claiming said act was good experience for the child, only adding the condition that the sexual relationship should not be abusive or hurtful, completely disregarding that not only is sex with a child by definition abusive, and by extension hurtful, because children are not able to consent to sex. In short, if by some miracle Chris was actually capable of conceiving children and somehow being allowed to keep them, they would grow up sick, hungry, penniless, neglected, abused, and or dead. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, that sounds by itself fairly damning and fairly conclusive, and this would be the part of the video where I would say I don't really have anything else to say apart from this. But there is a little something else I wanted to add. First of all, the relationship Chris would have with his hypothetical spouse would be incredibly different, because both of them would now have a lifetime responsibility. Forget Sonichu, Chris's children would be his own legacy from now on. And you've got to wonder about what Chris would do to make his kid's life easier, because it's something I'd imagine any respectable partner would love to see their partner doing, is doing just as much as their share and to make the roles equal. But Chris doesn't really believe in equality. He believes he is the man while the other is still the baby, which it doesn't really, again, this all plays into the idea about the fact that Chris is just a deadbeat. But the only thing that could be worse in that sort of instance is Chris becoming a deadbeat parent. Now, I will say, again, I'll make a video about this separately, but I was extremely fortunate that I did not have deadbeat parents, that I was raised by very, very kind and very, very charitable people. And you learn quite a lot of things just by using your eyes, I should say. And, well, again, Chris is also a textbook example of, let's thank the heavens above that the best thing that could have possibly happened to Chris is not bringing other kids into this world that would have been at the mercy of somebody like Chris. And with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this article on Chris's imaginary family and the imaginary prospects of Chris ever having a family of his own because of what we know has happened. And I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to another Chris-chan Quickie reading. How is your Easter Sunday going, ladies and gentlemen? Now, I know fine well that I'm at work, and I'm going to be at work for literally 10 whole days since this Wednesday that's just gone, so it feels very, very strange to, not be at, go to Mass during Holy Week, at all because of work. So this whole thing has been a very surreal and yet a sort of an experience I don't particularly very like. But for those who are at all interested, and even for people who don't particularly enjoy this time of year as well, there is also some solace we can reconcile over the fact that, well, even if people are willing to disagree heavily with our beliefs, there are some things we can sort of universally agree on, and that is Chris's beliefs are ultimately based on false beliefs, and therefore, when it comes to things like spiritual possession, which is the topic of this article, we're about to find that there are some very, very, very suspect and very, very not good things about this. But let's be optimistic for what that's worth. So here we go. I have already told Barbara directly about the body swap. She took it very cool and calmly without any emotional outbursts or distress. Maybe it's because she didn't feel anything whatsoever as a result of this, and maybe she just didn't understand, so, there's that. This was Chris role-playing as Magi-chan, inevitably showcasing that his mother has long since given up on him. My words exactly. Spirit possession is the belief that spirits can possess a person's body. Chris believes he has experienced possession by his imaginary friends. He has increasingly used it as a maladaptive coping mechanism to avoid reality and criticism. I mean, what else was he going to do it for? And I need to pull my my mirror down, because this is the problem, by the way, with the lighting in this room, is that I always have to take this thing down, and it just creates this stupid marking around the outskirts of my wall whenever I do this. So, okay, and we're back. That was a trip, that wasn't it, eh? Such as when he began to roleplay as Sonichu as part of an elaborate fantasy to cope with being unable to attend the real-world BabsCon, or when he roleplayed as Mewtwo to defend himself from criticism levied by a Twitter troll. This practice has been colloquially known as LARPing, short for live-action role-playing after the real-life practice. And let's begin with the actual methods used. Chris believes this shit for real, though, because he tried to talk like Uzume, which sounds no different from how he normally talks. Only he tried to raise his pitch and couldn't pronounce the name of half the Neptunia characters. One of the idea guys. Or, now whether this was Stephen Boyd or Joshua... No, not Joshua Moon. Was it? No, it was... No, Joshua Moon's Null, so... whoever it was, that was it. And When Chris believes he has swapped his spirits with an imaginary friend, he roleplays as that persona. While doing so, Chris refers to himself in the third person. In calls and videos, he tries to change his voice and vocabulary, but usually fails. In a latter video, he made the excuse that when you possess somebody else's body, you gotta work within their vocabulary and their limitations and whatever. He sometimes changes the profile picture and name of his social media to match the OC he is possessed by. Chris appears to have forgotten he can do this on Twitter, forcing him to preface his tweets with Sonichu, to remind followers of the roleplay. He also changes his signature on occasional drawings to match the OC's name. This behaviour was unseen from Chris until the Idea Guys, the TT Squad, and various other enablers roleplayed as characters from Quickville to bend Chris into their will. After their removal, Chris retained the idea of roleplaying by saying his OCs are manifesting in Dimension 1218, the real world, his body for various reasons. While roleplaying, Chris says things that would sound very weird from Chris's mouth. While roleplaying as Magi-chan, for example, he called Bob a guilty pleasure waifu, ill, and ill. He might say this to prove that he is no longer Chris, as he would never say such a thing. Right? Mama, we all go to hell. During Chris's phase of role-playing that he is possessed by the spirit of Sonichu, he, as Sonichu, refers to both Chris's spirit and physical body as Mama, as both an allusion to how Sonichu referred to Chris as father in the comics, and to reflect Chris's transgender status. Uzume Tanobushi, 8th of November 2017 till the 13th of November 2017, mostly as influenced by the Idea Guys. Chris was brainwashed into believing that Chris was sharing his body with Uzume. Miss Uzume Tanobushi. She had been dormant inside my Dreamcast, and I pulled her out. And if that sounds familiar, ladies and gentlemen, it is literally the plot to the first third of Hyperdimension Neptunia 7, or V2 as it's sometimes known as. Though I think 7 is a bit more what they were going for, I guess. We've been sharing my body since, yes, she is able to control my body when she has control, that sounds rather redundant, and speak through my lips in her voice. Chris on being possessed by a fictional character. Now, in case you're wondering, this is not the first nor the last time this is ever mentioned. Oh, and by the way, this is Uzume Tanobushi, who also known as CPU Orange Heart, which I'm saying this for the people that care because, well, I don't know, it is what it is. Uzume Tanobushi, oh, they already mentioned it anyway, what am I talking about? Also known as Orange Heart, is a console patron unit, or CPU, in Mega Dimension Neptunia V2. I'm just going to say 7 from now on. She represents the Sega Dreamcast, and so far, she is the only female character that Chris has ever LARPed as. On the 8th of November 2017, Chris was brainwashed by an Idea Guy into believing that he was sharing his body with the spirit of Uzume. John Yamada, an ally used by one of his Idea Guys, texted Chris and crafted a roleplay scenario in which Chris's Sega Dreamcast was the portal that could connect Chris to his imaginary safe space of Quickville. Guided by suggestibility, Chris subconsciously filled in the roleplay scenario further, believing that Magi-chan teleported to the real world, scanned the Dreamcast, and confirmed there was a powerful force inside the console. Chris left the console on for 24 hours to charge it, and then touched it, getting shocked and interpreted this as pulling out Uzume, a fictional character, into his body. Chris claimed Uzume can control his body and speak through him with her own voice. On the 13th of November, he retconned his delusion, saying that he had not been sharing his body with Uzume, but a clone of her named Orange Spiral Seal. Also mentioning a battle against fellow Neptunia character Kurome, he no longer has the voice of Uzume in his head, but still retains the powers of the 4 main goddesses as well as his own powers. Magi-chan Sonichu. Now, by the way, have you got all this, by the way? Because if you think this shit has gotten wild before, oh man, it's about to get crazier. Magi-chan, 14th of August 2019 to the 14th of September 2019, and late September to October 2019. Thank you. Barbara was more of a guilty pleasure waifu. Chris as Magi-chan demonstrating his Oedipal complex. I would say it's Chris demonstrating his he badly wants to bang his own mother complex, so details. For 1 month, from the 14th of August 2019 to the 14th of September 2019, Chris believed he had swapped bodies with Magi-chan. He acted the role on video in first recorded statement of Magi-chan's Sonichu. You know what, since it's kind of integral to just how insane this whole thing gets, we may as well check it out, because it's, well, here is the actual thing. The first recorded statement is Chris's first YouTube video of August 2019, though it was indeed filmed and announced on Twitter on the day in the title, for no apparent reason apparently. It would not be uploaded for another 3 days after that. The video showcases Chris's mental health at its absolute all-time lowest. The frazzled, bed-headed hairstyle he chose to don in the video doesn't help matters. Either Chris, for once, is not speaking in his Tongo Felesto. Magi-chan is instead supposedly controlling Chris's body, while Chris's soul was peeled off and stuck onto Magi-chan's invisible incorporeal body. Beside him, Magi-chan reiterates that the dimensional merge is in its final stages, rambling in classic Chris fashion without much coherence. In a rare moment of self-insight, he states that Chris's brain is well inferior to his own character's. Chris tries to demonstrate his psychic powers on a fidget cube, yet fails. By the way, in case you're wondering as well, this is the drawing he decided to do for it. Whoa, holy crap, I'm in your body, hubby. I know it is awesome that we are progressing in the events, but even with all the mental prep work with me, this feels overwhelming to me. So, Chris maybe possibly suggests the idea to Magi-chan that this was not exactly a good idea. Christine, you need not fret. You will do well while running and working with my body. I know it's so. Meanwhile, I shall talk with your mother and improve the psychic and magic output from this brain and body and make it function in its fullest here. I don't know where here is, and I don't particularly understand when this was ever meant to happen, but for the sake of... No, actually, let's not give Chris the benefit of the doubt. It's just, as you might imagine. So, here's the... for what they're worth, here's Chris making an ass out of himself.
Good day, everyone. It is I, Magi-chan.
I know I've discussed this before when talking about the dimensional merge, but it's an open statement on just how bad Chris's state of health has become, because any time he's ever had to make any videos in this period, whether it's the dimensional merge or spirit possession, Chris always looks like he's either having a series of small strokes, or Chris just does not look like he's been taking care of himself. We all know it's a combination of this and amongst other things, but for what they are worth, I think it's just worth putting it out there. And this is the sort of thing, ladies and gentlemen, as I said it before, when things go unchecked, this is the sort of thing that can happen. So, yeah.
Sonichu. I have taken possession of Christine's body, as we have swapped bodies. Her soul is in my body, as you can see right behind me, on the opposite side of the dimension curtain. I am recording this today, as definitely backed up by Christine's second phone. It's August the 15th. Which, on that note, should be the day I have uploaded this video, originally, long before I made it public. You could definitely tell that it is I as opposed to Christine, not only in the vocal tones, but also my behavioral patterns. The dimension merge...
and mind you, another thing as well that should be noted is that behavioural patterns, well, one behaviour that remains the same is that when Chris absolutely does not go anything by a certain script, he just literally phones it in. I mean, again, Chris posing and just thinking about exactly what he's even... like, anybody else could have just said that this was the actual ending of the video right here, that Magi-chan just wanted to keep things vague, but no, that's... I don't get it. Maybe we should just put it through as I don't get it. And I probably won't ever get it, because I'm not this completely insane. You know what I mean?
The dimension merge continues to progress. An event will happen very soon where my body fully comes into this 1218 dimension. And I will be swapped back with Christine, and everything will definitely further progress from there. It is quite different being in a human body as opposed to my Sonichu body. Especially in the brain. My brain works a lot better. This brain, it needs work. But I am working on it. I am improving.
Chris trying to convince people things that we're never going to believe in, and even when he tries to like tip his hand as well, he still can't make it turn over.
Well, that aside anyway.
Yep.
Still working on it.
That's it.
She's got power. I'm helping her find it. And she's borrowing my power too. She'll be making the journey very soon to progress everything there is.
No, I'm just going to end it here by just straight up saying is that, well, no, Chris, you know what you need? You see this bed here? Lie in it for a good couple of days, because you look like you need sleep. And this was only a few days after he got back from BronyCon of 2019 as well, if you want a little bit more of a closer statement than this. Try, 26th of November 2019. On the 26th of November 2019, Chris discussed her belief that he had body swapped with Try Sonichu, an OC and recolor of Magi-chan created by MKR Night V, in order to work on the dimensional merge, and that he ended the body swap after boosting Try's abilities and making him overpowered. Which is not particularly new when it comes to Chris and his characters, but what can you do? Sonichu, 15th of April 2020 to the 25th of February 2021. From between these two dates, Chris believed he had body swapped with Sonichu. He also believes it began earlier, retconning a beginning date of the 31st of March 2020, which conflicts with him not yet being in Sonichu's character in the 10th of April 2020 Red vs Blue reaction livestreams video. Chris initiated the body swap as part of an elaborate maladaptive coping method for missing out on the BabsCon convention, which he had cancelled due to COVID, which had been cancelled. Using Sonichu as a mouthpiece, Chris claimed he was able to visit BabsCon in C-197, which presumably avoided the pandemic, much like World War II. Chris continued acting out the role of Sonichu while he was featured as a guest character on Chris-chan and Max Mandu live Leftovers Tonight, and continued to act as Sonichu all the way through February with only brief interruptions when he pretended to be Mewtwo and himself from another dimension, detailed below. An enabler, by the name of Kwai Sandbag, reached out to Chris in early 2021, having been inspired to do so after contacting Chris following a binge watch of Chris-chan A Comprehensive History. By claiming that he was a psychic, he told Chris that he could help reverse the body swap process in a series of calls. Chris finally stopped role-playing as Sonichu on the 25th of February 2021, immediately following the news about My Little Pony Generation 5. He heralded his return by continuing to ramble about the Dimension Merge and bash the G5 cartoon. Which is a bit of a damp squib as far as that whole thing ending, but, well, yeah. Sonichu and Rosechu, November to December 2020. During December 2020, Chris, pretending to be Sonichu, claimed to the police that Chris's body was being controlled by both Sonichu and Rosechu. Rosechu had supposedly joined Sonichu a few weeks beforehand, Sonichu also illustrated the concept using Lego custom minifigs to represent Chris being video game controlled by the electric hedgehogs. Mewtwo, 14th of May 2020. Never speak against Christine Weston Chandler Sonichu ever again, or I shall see to your appropriate torment and punishment. Myself, farewell. On the 14th of May 2020, to defend himself from a troll who cast doubt on Chris's claims to be leading the Dimensional Merge, Chris paused his roleplaying of Sonichu to roleplay instead as his imaginary husband Mewtwo. Mewtwo took to Twitter to lambast and threaten the troll. Randy Stare, 6th of November 2020. Randy Stare was a mentally disturbed YouTuber who went on a killing spree in June 2017 before taking himself out. For those who don't know, Randy Stare was also the guy who was heavily obsessed with the character Amber from Danny Phantom. Have we got that? Okay. Chris learned about this and took an interest in him after viewing a YouTube documentary by the WCT, also known as Wildcat, who was, I think it was also a troll in league with Bella, but yeah, there's going to be an entire video about I'm going to do like a long form video about Chris's trolls anyway, so watch out for that. On the 6th of November 2020, Chris believed he channeled the spirit of Stare possessing his transgender ghost Sona, Andrew Blaze, recording an audio file to help her get a post-death message out. Now, I know, at this point, anybody outside of Chris who, if they did something like this, would be looked upon with disturbing levels of ridicule, because why are you trying to say this about somebody who killed a lot of people? But considering this is, again, it's interesting, it's curious, ladies and gentlemen, because again, like I said, if this was anybody else who did something like this and talked openly about Randy Stare, they would have been mocked and kicked off the internet faster than you could say Amber, Amber, Amber. But this is like one of the least insane things Chris has ever done in his life. Terrible though it was, but insane nonetheless. Robert Chu. Chris roleplayed as his own father, Robert Chu, what he calls his father, according to a summarized jail letter. Good lord. I wonder if he was roleplaying as Robert Chu when... Okay, let's not think about that either. Other versions of Chris. Chris of Dimension 1214, 27th of August 2020. As an excuse to break his Sonichu roleplay, Chris pretended to be himself from another dimension to answer a short Q&A session on the 27th of August. Chris again roleplayed as 1214 Chris in September. Younger Chris, 1st of June 2021. Chris channeled his post-self in June 2021 after he had begun reading Chapter 5 of Warhol/Chris-chan in order to consult with his inner child and search for unresolved issues. As to whether or not any of these have been answered and whether or not that it's just everything we've known already, you can say that for yourself. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of Chris's spiritual possession. At this point, I'm thoroughly convinced that Chris is only trying to conjure up new insane things just so that he can remain being listened to. Maybe nobody will take any interest in it, but it's just saying, oh yeah, Chris is also doing this now. We may as well just pull up a chair, grab some popcorn, and see exactly how this plays out. That's kind of really all there is to say about this, because there's nothing in this to believe in, apart from the fact that, well, Chris just suddenly thinks that this is concrete, and this is something that's going to make his life better. Now again, it's not really for me to say whether or not this has actually improved Chris's life or not, but from all the evidence we've seen so far, especially with what happened in June, well, in July I should say, of 2021, not very much. So with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I certainly hope your Easter Sunday is going well, because as we are roughly covering at least 7 aspects of Chris's spectacular fantasies and delusions, as well as perhaps his divine worships in the case of Sonic the Hedgehog, we also have to uncover things that Chris is at one point devoted to, but then it's become literally obvious that, owing to the fact that nobody's ever thought to bring them up again in one of Chris's live streams, I think it's fair to say that, well, he has completely forgotten about it, and will probably rely on you guys to forget about it as well, because, well, for reasons we'll get into very shortly. Polyamorous marriage. Awesome romps in the hay with Magi-chan as well as Crizel. The polyamorous marriage is an escapist fantasy and maladaptive coping mechanism brainwashed into Chris by the idea guys. Since March 2018, Chris was led to believe he is in a bisexual marriage with fictional OCs, Magi-chan and Crizel Rosechew. They tied the knot with Chris in March, with Sylvana and Mewtwo officially joining in later. In other words, the real sweethearts were the ones he made up all along, alongside a copyrighted Nintendo character. I mean, I've heard of some insane things in my time, ladies and gentlemen, like that one story about a woman who fell in love with the Eiffel Tower, literally. Well, and that's not even like a metaphor for anything. That was a real story that happened. She loved the she really loved the Eiffel Tower. I mean, can you blame her? Oh, but speaking of things that like should like take the tone down just a wee bit. This is Crizel and Magi-chan on Chris's ceiling, so that when he goes to sleep at night, he can directly look up at the ceiling and see his husband and wife. Creeped out yet? You think that's a really stupid idea? So do I. Oh, and actually, I did one thing and I completely screwed up. Okay, maybe that's a little bit better. So there we go. And let's bigger the page one more time. Actually, that might be a bit too big. There we go. Sorry about that. Arguably, this is one of Chris's most bizarre collection of sweethearts to date. Formerly, Chris only desired real-world relationships in the Mailbag 32 7 years prior, when a fan suggested real dolls for companionship. Chris angrily replied that he would never ever settle for such a pretend relationship. Too late for that. His change of heart into accepting his imaginary friends for relationships may have been influenced by subconsciously understanding that he is unlikely to find a real romantic partner at this stage in his life, and with all of his basic baggage being publicly knowledge and publicly known. On the bright side, his love quest appeared to be finally over. I guess, in a way. As a coping mechanism, the imaginary marriage eventually failed to keep Chris satisfied. By early 2021, Chris was lamenting his loneliness and expressing a desire for real-world relationships. In more ways than one. This can be seen in the Lonely Feelings chat from March, where in a rare moment of self-awareness, he acknowledged that his imaginary friends cannot assuage his loneliness as they are not truly with him. With his fantasies and reality both leaving him, without a satisfying end to the love quest, Chris ultimately resorted to an incestuous affair with his own mother. Chris being in a marriage, my arse. Again, Chris... One would wonder as to why Chris was so even, like, among other things, I suppose. Let's not even think about getting into that. Participating individuals. Chris, Magi-chan, Crizel Rosechew, Mewtwo, Sylvana, and... Wait a minute, why is Pikachu in here as well? Helena, Helena, if you're watching this, how did Chris was there something that Chris just suggested? Are you kidding me? Biography. I go married to Magi-chan, Sonichu and Crizel Rosechew last March, and then I married Sylvana Rosechew and Mewtwo last June. We all share a polyamorous relationship. Chris explaining his current relationships, also orchestrated by the fact that Magi-chan and Crizel are holding hands. From at least November 2017, the idea guys had a significant influence on both Chris's real life and his Sonichu canon. By far, one of the greatest influences they had on Chris's real life was the relationships with his characters. Most of what we understand about these relationships stems from Chris's various texts and drawings. The seeds of Chris's marriage were originally sown when Chris announced in January 2018 that Magi-chan, previously known to be in a relationship with Sylvana, was now married to his mentor, Mewtwo. The Chris Magi-chan Crizel polyamorous relationship/marriage began on the 26th of March 2018, when Chris announced that his sweetheart... Actually, you know what, it's really interesting because I'm actually recording this on the 27th, so yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, would have been 6 whole years, and I'm going to see if we can... Is it possible that we can, Nah, it's probably not a good idea to inquire Chris about this. It's probably not worth it. Chris announced that his sweetheart search was over yet again. He did not disclose, however, that he was now married. He later mentioned that the supposed relationship involves 3 people, from the wording of it as himself and 2 others, implying that he was in a polyamorous marriage relationship at the time. Their identities were not known at the time, and because he claimed that they all knew each other in person, people assumed that Chris was in a relationship with 2 actual people. He later said one of them, Magi-chan, was his loving boyfriend, with the implication that the other, Crizel, was a woman. On the 10th of April 2018, Chris came out as bisexual, apparently after discussion with them. Days later, he uploaded a disturbing video, Dick Licker, That Is I, in which he licked an image of Magi-chan's penis drawn on a wall. He also updated his Facebook to note that he is a bisexual trans woman, instead interested in men and women. He affirmed that he gave oral sex to Magi-chan to a Twitter ween. Apparently, Chris's relationship is not merely polyamorous, but open, as he claims that they have no objection to his return to prostitution. Was this also something that the idea guys put into Chris's mind? Because there are certainly a lot of points in which people argue one way or another. Where did the idea guys' influences begin, and when did suggestions completely motivated by nothing whatsoever by Chris started coming out into the open? They also seem to be okay with Chris's Facebook and Twitter avatar being fan art from a member of the Quick Protect squad depicting him being kissed by a female fan, as well as Chris hitting on Brian Frogboy. The reveal. On the 30th of April 2018, Chris introduced his fanbase to Crizel Rosechew, calling her a very close gal, and that he had promised her he would make an amiibo figure of her. He then liked a comment from a fan which congratulated him on revealing one of his significant others. In BD, I'm back Buck, he implied that Magi-chan was the other lover. On the 5th of May, he released a preview of a special mini-comic to be included in Sonichu issue 13. It depicts him, Magi-chan and Crizel Rosechew getting married. The comic is dated the 26th of March, the same date as when Chris announced his sweetheart search to be over. When questioned by a fan about the relationship, considering Magi-chan was married again, Chris replied, "Polyamorous relationships and marriages are very cool there. Savannah, yes, her name is spelled with a Y, is totally cool, and Crizel and I being part of the wedding tree. Mewtwo was skeptical at first, but he came around and he really likes me too. And you know Mewtwo? He has a good heart, but cross him and you will regret it like Team Rocket did." Veil threats aside, ladies and gentlemen, we may also want to take a look at this. Chris, Magi-chan and Sylvana together and hugging it out. And it looks as if Chris Chan's head's about to explode. Though I must say, even the including of just married is maybe quite a nice touch, but, well, considering this isn't actually real, make your own comment about it. By late May, the sweetheart's troll status had become obvious, and several pieces of evidence linked them and Chris's recent bizarre content to the idea guys, who was thought to have stopped involvement with Chris after being doxxed in January. However, Chris made 2 tweets on the 25th of May acknowledging and calling out the idea guy, yet still referred to Crizel and Magi-chan as his sweethearts, and restated his bisexuality. In the Kopitz interview the next day, At some point in June, Sonichu and Mewtwo were added to the marriage. It is worth noting that Chris rejected a potential sweetheart in favour of his fictional characters, suggesting that he is happy with his current relationships. Whether or not he's happy to this very day, or if he was satisfied before, then why would he have to? Well, you know the rest. And we also know why that is as well, because he's not particularly happy with the fact that this is just a way of this is the problem as well with Chris trying to make excuses to cope with reality the way he does, is because it ultimately doesn't work, because, you know what, the heart wants what the heart wants. And Chris not being honest with himself and saying that this is simply not really what he wants. What Chris wants is actual affection from an actual living, breathing person. And Chris says so. He can't be satisfied at the knowledge that none of this makes any sense in reality. Married life. Chris described his marriage in some depth in the Count Dankula interview of June 2018. I was destined for this relationship, and that's why my past relationships, real and fictional, with the theoretical exes that were trolls and bullies that pretended to be women, that's why they all failed. Excerpt from... Wasn't there one interview that Chris had with Count Dankula, and even the Count himself looked perplexed and completely taken completely off guard by what Chris had said? And I know it's featured in the Geno Samuel documentary at some point, but we will get to that at some point. But I just can't get away from how utterly insane it sounds, because it is. 3rd of August 2018, Magi-chan persuaded Chris to publicly expose the Idea Guys by chronicling his experiences for future generations. The result was The Awakening of a CPU, a short story. The 26th of February 2019, following the release of Pokémon Detective Pikachu, the second trailer, Chris remarked that husband Mewtwo was indeed involved in the production of the film. Somehow, I don't exactly know why. On the 11th of March 2019, Chris gave the unfortunate news that Mewtwo was struck ill, but was on his way to recovering. Despite being a long-time Pokémon fan, he somehow failed to remember the instant convenience of Pokémon centers. Hey, I've just got this news from Magi-chan. Our hubby Mewtwo has come down with a really bad head virus. He is resting at the Quickfill Basilicom, and he should only be a few days until recovered. Prayers would be appreciated very kindly and much, please, thank you. Lightning, heart, lightning. Again, apparently that's what's needed for recovery of a Pokemon, when literally it's dun 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 ding. You know, it literally takes 6 seconds to heal a Pokemon up. In a letter he had sent to Helena Forenza on the 8th of May 2022, Chris states that he considers her OC Pikachu a part of his harem, although he has seemingly dropped it later on. He has also started to sometimes omit Crizel's name, but as shown a few times, notably in the Persona 5 livestream, he does still consider her his spouse. I don't exactly understand the reasons as to why Chris decided Pikachu was also just again, a character that wasn't even Chris's. You know what I'm saying? And for what they are, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a selection of just things. If you do want to see these as well in more detail, then you're more than free to do so, because, well, it's I think it's the thing to take away from this during the whole Idea Guys saga is the idea that Chris's grasp on reality was so incredibly tenuous before all of this took place, and Chris decided to just accept it no matter what, because maybe Chris was actually perfectly happy with all this. Maybe Chris was in some way completely satisfied with the idea of just completely throwing reality, sound mind, and reason completely out the window, just so that he had somewhere to relax in his mind with something he actually understands and loves. as to whether this is like healthy, it isn't. Not as far as I can work out. If you think this is somehow healthy, then again, you're more than free to do so. But, well, this is, again, considering Chris's situation and the fact that he's sort of been expunged to the land of make-believe until the very end of time, well, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope all of you guys have learned something from this article, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.